Look, we need to have a real conversation right now about some Cowboys who might be playing their final season in Dallas, and I'm not talking about the usual suspects everyone's debating on social media. Before we dive in, do me a favor and smash that subscribe button because we're dropping Cowboys breakdowns the moment news hits, and honestly, we need your support to keep growing this thing. The front office just completely reshaped this roster, and while everyone's hyped about the new additions, nobody's talking about what that means for the guys already here, the fan favorites who might have just had their roles completely eliminated without even realizing it yet. This season isn't just about winning games, it's about evaluation, and some of these players are being watched under a microscope they don't even know exists. So let's get into who's really on the chopping block and why the business side of football is about to get brutal in Dallas. Let me start with a name that's going to make some of y'all mad, but hear me out because the writing is already on the wall. DeMarvion Overshown is in serious trouble, and I don't think enough people are connecting the dots here. Yes, the talent is absolutely there when he's on the field, but here's the problem. When has he actually been on the field for a full season? He missed his entire rookie year with an injury, came back and played maybe 11 or 12 games before getting folded up in that Bengals game, then missed significant time again coming back from another setback. The best ability in this league is availability, and DeMarvion has not proven he can stay healthy, period. Now add in the fact that he just went out and got a new agent, which tells you everything you need to know about his intentions. He's positioning himself to get paid, and Dallas just watched Trevon Diggs and other injury-prone guys demand big money without being able to stay on the field consistently. You think they're making that mistake again? Not a chance. But here's what nobody is talking about when it comes to DeMarvion. The Cowboys just traded for Eric Kendricks, a veteran linebacker who's absolutely getting re-signed because Dallas doesn't trade for rentals anymore, especially at that position. They also just drafted Bam Bam Baroom in the 3rd round, and the coaching staff has already announced he's starting as the Mike linebacker. So you've got Kendricks probably playing weak side, you've got Baroom at Mike, and now where exactly does DeMarvion fit into Christian Parker's scheme? And the crazy part is, I don't even think we're running a true 3-4 base defense this year. Look at how this roster is constructed. We've got way more defensive backs than linebackers. We added Caleb Downs. We've got Jalen Thompson. We've got Kobe Durant and PJ Locke. Parker is going to be running nickel and dime packages the majority of the time, which means linebackers are coming off the field, not defensive backs. If you're DeMarvion Overshown and you can't stay healthy, you're not a scheme fit for what we're doing now, and there are cheaper options ready to replace you. What exactly is your value to this team beyond potential? The front office already put a contingency plan in place, and most fans haven't even noticed it yet. Let's talk about the reality of his contract situation because this is where it gets interesting. DeMarvion is about to hit free agency, and his agent knows that injury history is going to suppress his market value big time. So the Cowboys are going to come to him with a team-friendly deal, something that basically says, prove you can stay healthy, and we'll talk real money later. But I don't think DeMarvion or his agent are accepting that. They're going to want security now because of all the time he's missed, and that's where the stalemate happens. Dallas isn't paying top 15 linebacker money to a guy who's played 19 games out of a possible 70 in his career. That's just not smart business. And here's the other elephant in the room. If the Cowboys want to go after George Pickens next offseason, or keep other core pieces together, they can't be throwing money at a linebacker with DeMarvion's availability track record. It might come down to a Dez Bryant versus DeMarco Murray situation all over again, where the front office has to choose, and spoiler alert, they're not choosing the guy who can't stay on the field. Would I personally love to see a healthy DeMarvion ball out and become a cornerstone of this defense? Absolutely. But is that realistic given everything we've seen? I'm not betting on it. And clearly the front office isn't either. Now let's move to the tight end room because this is where things get really spicy, and I'm putting both Luke Schoonmaker and Jake Ferguson on notice. Starting with Schoonmaker, this dude was a 2nd-round pick and has done absolutely nothing to justify that investment. He had one decent game against Detroit where we saw flashes of why he was drafted that high, but other than that single performance, he's been invisible or worse. The problem is Schoonmaker was a Mike McCarthy pick from a regime that's already gone. And now you've got Brian Schottenheimer and Christian Parker evaluating this roster with fresh eyes, and they don't owe Luke Schoonmaker anything. The Cowboys went ultra-aggressive adding tight ends this offseason, bringing in Michael Trigg as an undrafted free agent with serious vertical ability, adding DJ Rogers out of TCU, who's basically a more athletic version of Jake Ferguson, and keeping Brevin Spanford, who is hands down the best blocking tight end on this roster. Where does that leave Schoonmaker? I'll tell you where. 4th on the depth chart at best, and that's if he even makes the roster out of training camp. But here's what nobody is talking about. Jake Ferguson might be in just as much trouble, and I know that's going to upset people because he's Dak's buddy and had a bunch of targets last year. Let me hit you with a stat that should terrify you if you're a Jake Ferguson believer. He averaged 5 yards per catch last season. 5 yards. That means every time the ball went to Jake Ferguson, the play basically died on contact. He is the literal definition of a receiving black hole. The ball goes in, nothing comes out, no yards after catch, no explosive plays, nothing. And don't even get me started on that red zone play where he was so slow getting off the line that Dak threw to a spot where Jake couldn't even get to. And then the next week, Schottenheimer and Dak were joking about how slow Jake is. You know what they say? There's truth in every joke. And when your offensive coordinator is publicly clowning you for being slow, that's not a good sign. Jake Ferguson does nothing at an above-average clip, and I've been saying this for over a year now. He's not a bad player, he's just aggressively average, and the only reason he got all those targets is because Dak trusts him, not because he's actually creating separation or making plays that other tight ends can't make. The addition of Michael Trigg changes everything because Trigg brings a vertical element to the tight end position that we haven't had in years. He can actually threaten the seam, he can run past linebackers, and he's got the size to box out safeties down the field. You know what that does for this offense? It completely changes how defenses have to play us. Right now, when we line up CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens on the boundary, defenses can cheat their safeties outside because they know our tight end isn't a real vertical threat. But if you put Michael Trigg running a seam route with Kevontae Turpin crossing underneath, suddenly those safeties have to respect the middle of the field, and that opens up everything for CeeDee and Pickens on the outside. That's how you unlock an explosive offense, not by forcing targets to a tight end who runs like he's got cinder blocks tied to his ankles. Jake Ferguson is a good dude and a solid teammate, but this is the NFL, and if Michael Trigg or DJ Rogers can do what you do with more athleticism and upside, you're expendable. The Cowboys have to start thinking about paying guys like Tyler Guyton and keeping cap space for George Pickens, and that means tough decisions are coming at positions where we've got younger, cheaper options ready to step up. Would I be shocked if this is Jake Ferguson's last year in Dallas? Not even a little bit. Let's talk about Kevontae Turpin because this is another one where the fan love doesn't match the on-field production anymore. Turpin is about to turn 30 years old in August, and last season was straight up disappointing on multiple levels. The return game wasn't explosive, special teams as a whole was a penalty-filled disaster, and every time they tried to manufacture touches for him on offense, it felt like a wasted down. And that's the real issue with Turpin. Once he catches the ball and gets touched by a defender, the play is over. He weighs about as much as a strong breeze, so if anybody gets hands on him, he's going down immediately. We saw one big play against Washington last year, and outside of that, how many times did we watch him jump for balls he didn't need to jump for, breaking his own stride and making himself an easier target? That's literally one of the first things they teach you as a receiver. Don't leave your feet unless you absolutely have to, because it kills your momentum and gives defenders extra time to close. But Turpin does it constantly, and it's maddening to watch. Here's the business side that makes Turpin expendable. He's out of guaranteed money after this season, which means the Cowboys can cut him for basically nothing, just a $2 million dead cap hit. Meanwhile, they just drafted Ryan Flournoy in the 7th round out of East Carolina, a guy who's got burner speed, is a full foot taller than Turpin and is making rookie minimum money. If Flournoy can do even 70% of what Turpin does on returns and offensive gadget plays, why would Dallas pay Turpin's salary when they're trying to save every dollar for bigger extensions? The answer is they wouldn't. Turpin has to have a massive year on special teams specifically, and I'm not even talking about touchdowns. I'm talking about consistently giving this offense favorable field position, cutting down on penalties, and actually catching the ball when it's thrown to him. The Cowboys tried to make him a jack-of-all-trades last year by involving him more on offense, and honestly, I think that hurt his effectiveness as a returner because he was trying to do too much. If they let him focus purely on returns this year, maybe he can recapture some of that explosiveness from a couple years ago, but if he doesn't, he's gone, and nobody should be surprised when it happens. Now let's get to a name that's gonna hurt to talk about, but we have to be honest here. Daron Bland is absolutely on the hot seat, and the margin for error is razor thin. I know everybody fell in love with the pick-six streak, and trust me, I was hyped watching it too, but we have to evaluate what we've actually seen since then, and it's not pretty. Bland missed significant time with a stress fracture, which, by the way, is a structural injury that doesn't always fully heal, right? And even when he was on the field last year, he looked uncomfortable and out of sync. Remember that Cardinals game against Marvin Harrison Jr.? That was painful to watch. How about the Lions game where Jameson Williams absolutely cooked him the entire night? That wasn't just a bad game. That was a film study exposing his limitations as an outside corner. Daron Bland's superpower has always been his ability to drive on the ball when the pass rush forces quick throws. That's why he had so many pick sixes, because he was already running forward with momentum when he made the interception. But when he has to turn and run down the field with receivers, when he has to play off coverage and recover, he's just not that guy. And here's what makes this situation even more complicated. The Cowboys just brought in Cobie Durant, who according to PFF had a higher grade than Bland last season on 70 more snaps. Let that sink in. Cobie Durant would have been our best cornerback last year if he was on the roster, including a healthy Daron Bland. Now add in Savion Reynolds. Add in Devin Moore, who they just drafted in the 4th round and reportedly love. Add in Caleb Downs, PJ Locke, and all these other defensive backs they've stacked up. The depth is completely different now, and if Bland can't stay healthy and return to being a legitimate shutdown corner, not just a guy who gets opportunistic picks, then he's not worth the $20+ million he's getting paid. You cannot justify paying a corner that kind of money if he only functions at a high level when you have an elite pass rush in front of him. That's not a number 1 corner, that's a really good number 2 who benefits from scheme and situation. The Cowboys need Bland to prove he can take away half the field on his own, and if he can't do that this year, they've got younger and cheaper options ready to take his spot. The injury history is what scares me the most, because stress fractures in your foot are not something you just shake off. And once your body starts breaking down structurally, that's a red flag that you're heading toward chronic issues. Bland also spent most of his career playing nickel corner before they moved him outside, so he's still learning how to play that boundary spot at a high level, and last year was rough for that transition. He never looked comfortable, he never looked confident, and way too many times we saw receivers getting open against him on routine routes. Christian Parker's scheme might help mask some of those issues, and hopefully having a real pass rush this year with Micah Parsons healthy and the new additions up front will make Bland's job easier. But if we're being brutally honest, the trajectory since the pick-six season has been going the wrong direction, and at some point the Cowboys have to decide if they're paying for what Bland did 2 years ago or what he's actually doing now. I'm rooting for the guy to come back and ball out, but the reality is, he's on thin ice, and if the injuries keep piling up, or the performance doesn't improve, they've got an out on his contract they will absolutely use. Let me throw one more name at you that I think is quietly on his way out after this season, Terrence Steele. Now, everybody knows Steele isn't a long-term answer at right tackle. That's been obvious for a while, but the Cowboys have finally put pieces in place to move on from him, without completely destroying the offensive line. They drafted Tyler Guyton to be the left tackle of the future. They brought in Drew Shelton from Penn State, who can play tackle. They've got Johnny Cornelius from Oregon, who's a natural right tackle. And they still have Nate Thomas in the mix. That's a lot of options, and it gives them flexibility to either kick Guyton over to right tackle and let Shelton or someone else play left, or just plug one of these young guys in at right tackle and see what happens.